She will be talking about the Lexile Framework today. This is a very useful tool that is used widely in the US, but is a little bit unfamiliar in, for instance, other parts of the world like Europe. And it is a widely used international reading metric. She will explain everything to you in a minute. Schools in the Netherlands that are attached to this project use the Lexile system as well to differentiate and to get a different view on the levels that our students are performing at in our classroom. So over to you, Jing Wei.
All right. Thanks so much for the introduction, Lise. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah, all right. All right, so I will be speaking to all of you about the Lexile framework and how it can be used in the EFL classrooms. The company that has actually created the Lexile framework is called Metametrics, and our mission is to bring meaning to measurement. And we actually do this through measuring both the content as well as test takers. So on the content side, we use machine learning technology to model the complexity of the reading materials. And then on the student side, we link Lexile scale to different types of assessments that students are taking so that we can determine their reading comprehension level. And then we figure out the optimal match between the content and student ability so that students can read materials that's in their zone of proximal development. In other words, they will find it interesting, engaging, challenging, but not frustrating. And because Lexile is a universal scale that has been linked to many different assessments, that means we can actually monitor students' growth across these different assessments and to determine whether they are ready for college and careers. So Lexile framework for reading is really the universal de facto standards that's used in the United States. Over 65 reading assessment programs, half of the states in the United States actually report Lexile measures. So on the left-hand side, you can see a logo wall, kind of giving you an idea about the different kinds of reading assessments in the programs that have been linked to Lexile. They are not exhaustive, but you can probably recognize some familiar names here, such as ETS, Pearson, Scholastic, Cengage, etc. And then on the right-hand side, you can see all the blue highlighted states that are actually currently reporting Lexile measures on their score report. In spite of our prevalence in different assessments, believe it or not, Metametrics is actually not an assessment company. We report students' Lexile by linking to whatever reading assessments that students are already taking. Because we don't believe in adding more assessments to students. We believe in getting more information from whatever assessment that students are already taking. And we try to maximize that information by matching students' reading assessment results to the optimal reading contents. So how do we do this? We created this Lexile reading framework that has two sides. So on the left-hand side, we have a measure that reflects students' reading comprehension levels. And we did this by linking to students' reading assessments. And on the right-hand side, we assign a Lexile measure to the book difficulty. It reflects how difficult a book is for students to comprehend. And then we match students to books through a psychometric method called conjoint measurement, so that when students read a book that exactly is identical to their Lexile measure, they will find the book challenging but not frustrating. So why it is important to figure out the optimal match? Think about your own classroom and your own students. If you will give a book that is way too difficult to a student probably will feel really frustrated because they can't understand anything. And they are very likely to quit after trying it for a little while. However, and on the other hand, if you are giving a book that is way too easy for students, they will get bored because they can understand everything in that book, and it will not be optimal for their reading growth. So at Metametrics, we are trying to figure out the sweet spot so that we land in somewhere in the middle, not too hard, not too difficult. So what do some of the book measures look like? So I'm trying to give you some example here. So on this graphic, you will see that the Lexile scale runs from BR 300L, which stands for beginner reader, or minus 300L, to all the way to 1300L. But mathematically or theoretically, there is no lower limit or upper limit for Lexile. But in the real world, it is probably really, really difficult to find a book that it has a Lexile measure that's higher than 2000L. So to give you some examples here, the Castle, the book would be 1280L. The Pearl would be 1010L. And then if we move down a little bit, we will see, like, for example, Harry Potter, 940L. Charlotte's Web would be 680L. So not sure if you're familiar with Charlotte's Web, but it's actually my favorite book. So it is a chapter book that's designed for young learners. It is a chapter book in the sense that it does not have so much picture in it. It is still like primarily consists of text, has complete sentences and the paragraphs. But because it was written for young learners, it used simple vocabularies and simple sentence structures. So in comparison, the Castle or the Pearl that kind of have Lexile measures above 1000, those books would have a lot more elevated vocabulary and a lot more complex sentence structures. And then if we move down a little bit further on the scale, Abraham Lincoln would be only 440L, Green Eggs and Ham would be 210L. So why does Green Eggs and Ham have such low Lexile? Because it has a lot of pictures, and not all of the sentences are complete sentence structures. It has a mix of sentence fragments and complete sentences, which make it a lot easier for beginner readers to decode and digest. So these are some of the examples for what the book measures look like on the Lexile scale. So it is really important to bear in mind that Lexile measure is applied to both students and text. And on the student side, it is capturing their global reading comprehension. What that means is that you cannot really infer students' ability on specific subtraits based on their Lexile. Let's say if a student gets 1000L, you cannot say that her ability to make inferences is at 1000L, because we only capture the global reading comprehension. And then on the text side, the dominant factors that's driving text complexity is the complexity of sentence structures and also the complexity of the vocabulary. Why are these factors really, really important compared to others? Because you think that, if a book has a lot of complex sentence structures, it will take longer for students to pass those sentence structures, and they probably have to hold more in their working memory as well. And similarly for vocabulary, if a book has a lot of abstract vocabulary and low frequency vocabulary, students probably will take longer to really pass those vocabulary and understand them. So it will negatively impact their reading fluency, and it will kind of making comprehension a lot more difficult for them. And then we are trying to really figure out the optimal match between students' reading comprehension and the text difficulty. So in other words, Lexile measures are really, really helpful for educators because they can use Lexile measures to identify students' reading comprehension ability, and also figure out the individual growth trajectory for every single student. So just by talking to some of the project members I understand that in a lot of European countries, differentiated instruction is a primary focus for a lot of educators because you have students from a wide variety of ability. So Lexile is especially helpful for that because each student can get their own Lexile, and then you can figure out what are the collection of the books that is targeting each individual students so that they can be exposed to that collection of book and kind of follow their own optimal growth path. So understand that Lexile was developed in the United States. So that's why we are very, very interested in whether they can be applied internationally. So we did a lot of validation research to test the appropriateness of Lexile in different countries. So one study that was conducted was examining the textbooks written in South Korea. So we looked at English textbooks approved by Ministry of Education from grades 5 to 12. And here we kind of plotted out their Lexile measures here. As you can see, from lower grades, grade 5, all the way to higher grades, grades 12, their Lexile measures increase monotonically, which means they gradually increase without any dips. So this kind of provides validity evidence for Lexile measures. At the same time, it also shows that the textbook writers in South Korea have done a really good job at leveling their textbooks. And then here is another study that's also conducted in South Korea. So this is the reading gap study, because the researcher not only looked at the text difficulty, they also looked at students' Lexile reading ability levels and plotted these two next to each other. So here you can see the blue line that represents the text difficulty for English textbooks in Seoul National University for different majors. And then the red line represents students' reading Lexile measures for different majors. So here you can see that the blue line is above the red line. What that means is the textbooks are probably really difficult for students, and it's really challenging for them to handle those books. The only exception, however, is business administration, where we can see the red line is actually above the blue line. Why is that? Maybe Seoul National University did a really good job getting like really high English proficiency students for business administration. That's why their English is really good and they don't have any difficulty handling the reading materials. So now moving to a different country, Japan. Researcher Nigeshi did a study in 2015 looking at the reading demands for different university entrance exams. And this is really an interesting finding, because you can see that Osaka University has the most challenging English reading passages, even higher than Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. And then the test that has the lowest reading demands is National Center test, only at 1030L. So whoever's that's taking National Center test is really lucky. So now I'm moving beyond the education sector and looking at how Lexiles have been used around the world. So Lexile have also been applied to measure reading demand in career and the workplace. So here we have the Lexile ranges for different work professions, such as law and public safety, education and training, etc. And unsurprisingly, if you want to be a lawyer, you probably need to handle texts that are a lot more challenging than if you want to work in sales and the service. And the Lexile have also been applied to measure newspapers internationally. And it's really interesting that, for example, The Guardian in UK is at a much lower Lexile measure compared to the Singapore newspaper, the Straits Times. So now I'm doing a deeper dive into Korea. So at Metametrics, we have a Korea database that actually has a list of all the fast and growing popular careers and their reading demands, so that anyone is interested in knowing what are the reading demands for the career that you are aspiring to, they can come to our Korea database and look it up. So for example, if a student wants to be attorney, they can look into our career database and found, okay, I need to be at probably 1,500 or even higher Lexile to be able to meet the demands for an attorney. Compared to a marketing research analyst, and then you probably only need to be a little bit like 13, 15L to be able to read the trade books there. And then going down, a video game designer, only 1,300. And if you want to be a welder and a cutter, you probably don't even need to reach 1,200L. So at Metametrics, we are not only interested in capturing students' reading measures at a single point of time. We are interested in their reading growth and their reading and their growth potential. And we did this through our growth planner. So what I have here is, let's say, if we have students' Lexile reading measures at 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade, and based on their individual points of time, we can create the growth trajectory. So that's represented by the dotted black line. And then depending on what education or career goal that student have, we can also map out the recommended growth trajectory, which is the solid green line. And then we can compare those two and figure out whether students need to have more reading instruction so that the gap between their actual growth and the recommended growth can be narrowed. So far I've covered different validity studies for Lexile and applications of Lexile measures for newspapers and career, etc. So you must be really curious about what exactly is the algorithm that has been used to measure the text complexity. So just to give you a taste of that, we actually used a machine learning algorithm called random forest to model text complexity. So we started with a library of features that have been shown by research to predict text complexity, such as the number of phonemes in a word, type token ratio, the length of sentences, etc. And then we went through an iterative feature selection approach and landed on an optimal combination of 9 text complexity variables that can best predict the complexity of textbooks. So these 9 complexity variables can be grouped into 4 indicators, and we created these indicators so that it's easier for educators and other users to understand. So these indicators include structural indicators and syntactic indicators, semantic and decoding indicator. So they basically cover these different dimensions of text complexity. And we also conducted additional validity research to make sure that Lexile measures can be applied to EFL text or reading passages. So we did this by compile a pool of pre-leveled CFR passages. So we have a pool of reading passages, and each of them has a pre-designated CFR level. And then we ran these passages through our Lexile analyzer, and then we looked at their Lexile measures. For example, here I have an A1 passage, and then we ran them through Lexile analyzer, and we got a Lexile measure of 240. And then we also got an A2 reading passage, and we also ran them through our analyzer and got a Lexile measure of 810. And then the same thing for B1 passage, its Lexile measure is 1220. So as you can see here, as we go from lower CFR level to higher CFR level, its Lexile measures also increased, which basically give us some confidence that our Lexile analyzer can be applied to measure EFL reading passages. And then we looked at publishers. So for publishers, they like to label their books or level their books, use CFR levels. And they usually did this based on subject matter experts' judgment. And we are curious about how reliable subject matter experts' judgment is by looking at the consistency of Lexile measures within a CFR level band. So here we looked at the distribution of Lexile measures of 4 graded reader books. And for each book series, I kind of used a different color to indicate that. So we have blue, black, green, and red. So let's focus on the black ones. As you can see here, if we go from A1 to C1 level, its Lexile measures are increasing. So this means that within a book series, the book publisher is doing a good job of leveling their content. However, if we compare the black bars with the blue bars, there's a big difference here. So let's focus on B1 level. So the mean level of the black books is only 600L compared to the blue bars, which is at 900L. So there is a 300L difference, even for the books that are all labeled as B1, which means that, hey, publishers use their own criteria to level their books. And when we compare one book series with a different book series, we kind of get an insight about, what is the discrepancy there. So that is Lexile Framework for Reading. Because it is so useful and so well received by educators and students, we applied the same approach and developed a new framework called Lexile Framework for Listening. So it's basically the same idea. We have one single scale with two sides. On one side, we have a Lexile audio measure, which basically reflects how difficult it is for a student to process the audio content. And then on the other hand, we also have a measure that reflects students' listening comprehension ability, how well they can process the audio. And then we also place these two measures on the same scale so that if a 900L student listen to a 900L audio, they will find it challenging but not frustrating. So how did we develop these audio analyzer? So we again applied a machine learning technology so that we can pass the audio into different variables and figure out what are the best predictor of audio difficulty. And these features or factors can be grouped into four different categories: vocabulary, grammar, word sounds, and delivery. So if you still remember all those features that I have listed for text analyzer, you will see some similarity there. For example, for vocabulary, age of acquisition and abstractness are important predictors there. However, you will also notice some of the factors that are very unique to audio materials, such as pausing. So this is really too easy to understand intuitively. If a speaker pauses often, the listener will have more opportunity to process the content that has been covered and catching up. And then we also apply the same approach to oral reading as well. If you're not familiar with oral reading, it's basically present students a passage or a text and ask students to read the passage aloud. So we apply the same methods. So on the one side, we developed a method to measure how difficult a text is for oral reading. And then on the other hand, we have some mechanism to capture students' oral reading performance that includes how fluent they can decode the words and how accurate they can pronounce each word. And then based on these two measures, we can make recommendations on what passages students should read to improve their oral reading ability. So why is reading aloud or oral reading really, really important? So I know that in the EFL world, reading aloud tasks sometimes are used in speaking test. So, on speaking test, students are giving a passage and then they just need to read it aloud. And then they will be given a score based on their fluency, pronunciation, etc. It is not only useful for EFL speaking test, it is also useful in general, because it is a good predictor of students' reading comprehension level. It is used a lot in the United States because it is a very efficient test. It only takes 1 minute to complete. Students only need to read a passage for 1 minute to get a reliable measure, compared to the normal reading comprehension test usually probably will last about 30 minutes or even longer. It is a very reliable test because, if students read multiple passages at similar difficulty, their performance metrics will be very, very consistent from one session to another session. It is also very sensitive to changes in proficiency because if you are in the assessment field, you understand that we are not supposed to give, for example, reading comprehension tests to students multiple times within a week. Why? Because students are very unlikely to grow in their reading comprehension in a week. However, for oral reading, it is okay to do that because students are likely to show growth even within a very short time period. And also we have norms table so that students and educators can compare their results across grade levels in the countries. So I have given all of you a quick introduction of our Metametrics products, including Lexile Framework for reading, Lexile Framework for listening, and oral reading. So next, I'm going to do a quick demo of how you can find the Lexile measures for the books that you are interested in, and also how you can do a read aloud assessment. So let me just get out of this. So if you want to find the Lexile book measures, you can go to our hub lexile.com, and this is free of charge. And you can type in any book titles you are interested in and find the Lexile book measures. So I am from China, so I'm going to say The Art of War. And going to click on search. And here you can see The Art of War general literature. Its Lexile measure is at 1050L. If I click on the book, I not only can see the overall measure of this book, I can also see the indicator measure. So it shows me for sentence length, it actually has probably long sentences, but for word frequency, it actually has probably high frequency words. So not that hard on the vocabulary side, but it is hard because the sentences are probably very long. And then another way you can do this is to go to find a book. Let's say you have a second grader and you want to find books that are just right for them. And you are interested in general literature. And then if you click search, you can see all these books that are recommended for the students. Okay, so that's find a book. And next I'm going to do oral reading demo just to show you what our oral reading capacity looks like. Hold on for a sec. Let me make sure this is working. So to do that, you can go to our oral reading demo site. And you can record a passage from our library. Let me find an interesting passage. Let's say I want to read Sherlock Holmes. Okay. Hopefully this is going to work. And I'm going to click on record. Okay. Sherlock Holmes is a famous detective. He's great at solving mysteries. He uses his mind to figure out mysteries. He finds clues that other people miss. He's very observant. Holmes lives in London, England. He often helps the police solve crimes. He can think through any problem. Dr. Watson is Holmes' friend. He appears in all stories too. Sherlock Holmes is not real. Sherlock Holmes is a very famous fictional character. He has appeared in many stories, movies, and TV programs. Sherlock Holmes was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He first appeared in a story in 1887. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was born in Scotland. Doyle wrote 56 stories about Holmes. The Holmes stories are very popular. Sherlock Holmes is the most famous detective in English literature. Click on stop, submit. Okay, so it gives me 875L. And then I also receive, and the words correct per minute is 152. My accuracy level is 96%. And it says, great job reading at a nice pace. We noticed that you don't always use the right inflections, like rising at the end of the sentences for questions. So that's kind of the kind of feedback I would get. You know, I would get an overall indicator of my oral reading measure, how accurately I read, and whether I'm fluent enough. And then I will also get some reading feedback. With that, that's the end of my talk. So I'm going to stop sharing.